I think we'll start. Good evening. Flow Mumbai and SP Jain Institute of Management and Research invite you to a panel discussion around family managed business. I'm Malu Natarajan, Chairperson Flow Mumbai. Before the multinational corporation, there was family business. Before the Industrial Revolution, there was family business. Before the Enlightenment of Greece and the Empire of Rome, there was family business. Family enterprises are key catalysts for growth and integral to most economies. Operating in markets with significant potential, these businesses offer stability to the economy, are optimistic about growth, drive job creation, and have a long-term view on growth and profitability. There is an old proverb that exists across many cultures: shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, essentially meaning that wealth rarely survives a family business past 3 generations. While more than 30% of all family-owned businesses survive into the 2nd generation, only 13 will still be viable into the 3rd. Even more surprising is that only 3% are still operating in the 4th generation and beyond, according to the Family Business Institute. Picture yourself as a child on Diwali, holding an unlit sparkler with great anticipation. Once lit, the sparks fly everywhere and all too quickly dies out. That is, it comes to an end until you figure out that you could keep the sparks flying by lighting another stick before the first one extinguishes, and then another and another. Creating sustainable sparklers has become a game of collaboration amongst siblings, cousins, and friends. Lighting a spark is easy, but tending the flame requires due diligence. What does the next gen need to maintain the interest in the family enterprises? How do we cultivate owners who are stewards as well as investors? Is it legacy over profitability and growth? How important is legacy to the current generation? We have a very distinguished panel to talk to us about it in our session, Family Managed Business, Preserving the Legacy. Dr. Tulsi Jayaram is a professor of economics and chairperson, Family Managed Business at SP Jain Institute of Management and Research, Mumbai. An alumnus of the prestigious Delhi School of Economics, Dr. Jayakumar has a rich academic experience of over 27 years. She has recently co-authored a book with Mr. Gopalakrishnan, How TCS Built an Industry for India, which was released in February 2020. Dr. Jayakumar is currently a member of the Executive Committee of the FICCI Maharashtra State Council. Manish Choksi is the Vice Chairman of Asian Paints Limited. He joined Asian Paints in 1992. He has spearheaded the move to leverage new digital and IT solutions for growth and achieving improved business performance. He has been a catalyst for the company's foray into services such as painting, decor, home improvement solutions, as well as new initiatives. Aditi Kothari Desai is a director on the board of DSP Investment Managers Private Limited. She heads sales, marketing, and e-business and serves as a member of the Corporate Social Responsibility Committee at DSP IM. Aditi also leads financial wellness initiatives and was instrumental in launching a special initiative aimed at empowering women with financial knowledge to plan for their economic and long-term security. A wildlife enthusiast since the age of 10, she is a trustee of the Wildlife Conservative Trust. Our moderator is Radha Dheer, former managing director at Deutsche Bank and has over 25 years of diverse banking experience across global markets and corporate bank. Warm welcome to all of you, and over to Radha.
Thank you, Malu. And you're so right about family managed businesses. I think I would call them as a backbone for a country's prosperity. So while professionally managed companies have been around for so long, I think family managed businesses continue to represent a very large part of the economy and the economy's growth, even in developed countries like Germany and emerging markets like India. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to moderate with this esteemed panel. So Dr. Tulsi, I would like to start by asking you the first question. What, in your view, have been some of the legacy challenges which family managed businesses have faced historically? And how do you think, given the last 5 months, some of them would change going forward?
So I want to just step back and say that when you're looking at family businesses, I do not want to sound as though family businesses have only challenges. We'll come to some of the good points about family businesses later, but I just want to bring to the attention of all of you that a family business is a unique entity. It's a combination of two terms, family and business, right? And so as you're asking me this question, it's just going on in my mind. uh, how would I be able to characterize a whole set of businesses on the basis of, say, the family characteristic and the business characteristic, and then see how do these two pose challenges, right? So we could actually, can you hear me? Because there seems to be some internet. Is it okay?
No, it's fine.
Okay. So there are family businesses where, I mean, I was reading a meme just before we started this. And so you could look at family businesses where you can say, uh, family mujhe jeene nahi dega, business mujhe marne nahi dega, right? A second category would be business mujhe jeene nahi dega, family mujhe marne nahi dega, right? There could be a third category of businesses which says family or business both mujhe jeene dega, and family or business both mujhe jeene nahi dega, right? You could have four different sets of businesses, which basically is coming from a view and a perspective, which are the problem areas, right? You could have a problem area only in the family. You could have a problem area only in the business. You could have a problem area in both family and businesses, and you could have a smooth sailing because of both the family and the business. Obviously, any business would want to try and be in the fourth quadrant, right? But when I'm saying family mujhe jeene nahi dega or business mujhe marne nahi dega, we are looking at businesses which are good, but where the problems are arising on account of the family, right? And the problems in the family could be several. It could be a large family where you do not have clear roles and responsibilities laid out. You could have succession as a major challenge, where the person who is at the helm is not willing to let go. You could have professionalization as a challenge. So I have been speaking to a whole lot of our students over the last few months, and there are people who say that I uh, take care of the entire customer side myself. Now, can you imagine with a pandemic like the COVID? We just spoke about one of the esteemed industrialists going down with COVID. What happens if you have a one-man show and that is vulnerable to a disease like this? So there are issues on the business, on the family side. On the business side, on the other hand, a large part of our family businesses are actually SMEs. And Mr. Choksi and Aditi would bear me out on this one. We've had a recent change in the SME definition, which says that 99% of the businesses in India are actually now SMEs. So a whole set of characteristics on the business side, which pose challenges because they are actually SMEs. And that involves things like, problems on the finance side, the fact that they have typically not wanted to borrow at all. So capital is a concern, professional management is a concern, right? The ability to plan risks is a concern. So there are concerns on both the family and on the business side. But as I see it, at the end of the day, if you want to look at a good family business, a strong, healthy family business, it has to be one which walks on both these and works on both these planks together.
Yes. Dr. Tulsi, you talked about, professional talent, and you talked about succession planning. So, Manish, I have a question for you. Your company is known for its professional culture and how ownership and management have learned to coexist and challenge each other and take the company to new levels. So, it would be very interesting to hear from you. How did you go about to create this within your company and also attract the talent?
So I think good evening, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity. I think one of the things, probably this got started many generations or two generations back. I think the some of the problems that Doctor just talked about was that sometimes family businesses have incubated the business very well, but they don't recognize that they have reached a fork in the road where they have got to enlarge the scope of this management team and bring in people who are non-family members, quote unquote, we refer to them as professionals, and get them into the business and integrate them into leading positions within the businesses. Fortunately for us, our first generation itself was fairly um, aware that this role had to be fulfilled. And they began by bringing in people that brought complementary talent. So take, for example, our head of technology or our head of operations. They began to bring in people in those fronts. And they tasted great amount of success in the kinds of contribution those individuals made out there. And then obviously they got much bolder, and they gave them, and they brought in a new person who not only at the one time oversaw some of the legal governance and the financial aspects of the business, but also was capable of mentoring some of the second generation members who are beginning to enter the business at that point of time. And so what happened was that you inculcated amongst family members that, look, we need to work side by side alongside non-family members who bring in professional skills into the business. And obviously, when we as the third generation, the infamous third generation, in many of the contexts you can talk about, you were sort of born into the culture that there are family members and then there are professionals. And we have roles that we kind of have to play. And the hat of you being an owner of the business was left on a different table, but not on the table when you were talking about the management of the business. So by the time the second generation was involved, this separation of, wearing the ownership hat when you're deciding management decisions was kind of receded into the background. I wouldn't say it went away. It will never go away, but we learned to manage the complementary skills that came along. And it was done through a gradual maturity curve and learning curve that happened. And many of the things, if you don't start early, you will land up having to do all this in a crunch situation, which then obviously creates the kind of do or die things that we were talking of, that the survival of the business is at stake. And so I'm having to do this. We've been fortunate that we went through this learning curve, this maturity curve, as the business was doing very, very well. So you had success that was also pushing you to believe that this engine worked in that sense of the word. And so you made it work even harder and even better. And then arrived at probably the kind of state that we are at, where managers could openly view their, give their views to owners, and you could have a healthy debate on what are the options available and move forward on that. So I think it's not something that somebody writes in a textbook, but I think it's also, you can take many leaves out of many different people's learnings, but you need to try few things, learn from them, then go to the next level, then go to the next level. There is not like a shortcut to this formula that you can compress all of this in a short period of time. Obviously, as the scale of the business increases, this becomes harder and harder to manage if you don't start to separate the roles even more. So I would say that small size businesses can keep the management, the non-family ownership and the management divide a little bit more fluid. As the business gets larger, as was being said, you have to assume roles. And some of those roles do tend to get a little bit of hard line. And sometimes you have to cross difficult bridges in those hard lines, especially when there is succession involved in generations. And maybe we can talk about that a little later. But I would say that this has been a slow, gradual learning curve. The maturity came along with people assuming different roles. And I think we did it over a period of time. And maybe last but not the least, I think we were fortunate. And as people, everybody says, businesses are talking about the right business idea, the right finances. The most critical part is right people. I think all of the actors that played out in these various roles out there, whether they were family members or non-family members, and sometimes advisors and our independent directors, they played critical roles in helping us, go through some difficult periods when you had to make some changes in that sense of the word. So I think we were fortunate. And obviously, last but not the least, the business was successful. And so everybody knew that if you put in the effort, it would become even more successful.
Yes. I will come back to that succession planning point a little later, but I want to ask Aditi, because you talked about the professional role. So Aditi, you have a large role on the operational side of the business. I wanted to ask you, when you joined, were there any challenges that you faced? You decided to work on the operational side and not on the management side. Do you see any benefits coming out of that?
Yeah, hi, and hello, everyone. Actually, I have to say that I always wanted to work on the operational side. You know, you've come fresh out of business school. I went to two business schools, actually, undergrad and later on. And, I worked in Merrill Lynch before that for 2 years. So I was used to being a little bit on the operational side. It would be odd for me to come in any other way. But and I'm still on the operational side, maybe senior, and I rose up. But it helped me learn the nuts and bolts of everything.
Yes.
It also later on, when I take a position, I am on the board, but if I take a larger position in the company, I feel that, I know all the nitty-gritty, all the corners, and really, I can ask the right questions to the right people at the right time, and in the professionals. Plus, you get to know people much better rather than from the top where you only see one part of them.
That's right.
So I feel, and I feel that I am a very detailed person. I think that is something that was taught when I worked abroad. And one thing I've seen, maybe in general, people in India may not be as detailed. So, there's certain sort of, you compliment everyone and you get them to think like you, but you do it from the inside versus from the top. And I think it's really been very beneficial. Still today, I am in an operational role. I had, all the digital initiatives. I had sales. And I'm a director on the board. So, and all marketing I also had. So, and I report to a CEO who's excellent. He's better than me. I think the other thing to realize is to know where you stand. If there are people better than you, one thing we learned in business school is the whole idea is really, you have to keep thinking and how you can maximize shareholder value, of course keeping in all the principles and all of that intact, which is what the board of directors has to give, the basic values, principles, integrity. But then after that, it's how do you maximize shareholder value. And if there's someone better than you who can do that and is more qualified, sure, please. And you work as a team.
Yes.
And you
No,
complement each other. And
yeah,
Sorry?
that's what I was going to say. Professional management and ownership complementing each other. And both you and Manish are talking the same point there.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yeah.
I think it's important to drop your ego. That's a very important thing.
I think that's a really important point you made, to drop your ego for the success of the firm, right? Dr.
Yes.
Tulsi, yes. Dr. Tulsi, given we are talking about the current environment, I had a question. So everyone's been talking about digitalization and digitization, but in the COVID environment, it has hammered this point even more hard, that every business needs to be digital. We're all working from home and all businesses need to be digital. Do you think that given this focus on digitization, family managed businesses are better positioned to adapt themselves and change faster than non-family managed businesses? Dr. Tulsi?
1 minute. Sorry, I was muted. Yeah. So, so in the digital era, the question of whether family businesses are more flexible, are they more agile to change? I would think that on multiple metrics, family businesses would be very, very agile, and they would be flexible, right? They would be they would be able to change much faster than, say, a company which is more bureaucratic, which is more professional, right? Because at the end of the day, there are a whole set of bureaucratic norms that you have to jump. Having said that, I have been, as I've been saying, I've been talking to a lot of people as part of the research that I'm doing. I think many companies, many of the large corporates have now started looking like family managed businesses, in the sense that they are empowering their managers to go out and take decisions, on their feet. Is that happening with the family businesses also? Yes, it is. But at the same time, whether they would be able to take the advantage of digitization would depend on how much have they adopted technology and how much is the family really in sync with adopting technology. It's not just about adopting technology for technology's sake. It's also about having a certain kind of people who would be able to take advantage of that technology. Now, if you don't have those human resources, it would be fairly difficult for you to really jump onto that bandwagon a little late in the day and say that, hey, here, I'm also going to go digital. So there are these negatives. At the same time, as I'm telling you, what I feel very heartened about is the fact that there are family businesses who are saying that we have done better than what we would have done any time in the past. Now, I was speaking to this gentleman who owns a textile business in Ichal Karanji. So he would be within the, somewhere in the medium to large corporate sector. And the manner in which he has done it is that he has adopted technology. And he says that I've been able to take advantage of export markets, which have now opened up because of China kind of facing the flak. The domestic markets are doing nothing for me at all. But I have been able to, be there. And there's a whole lot of stuff that we have to look at before we just harp on the digitization piece, right? You have to look at your own quality and you have to make sure that there is a quality product that you're giving. So while digitization, it's not a panacea to all kinds of problems. That's the simple point. Are they adaptable and flexible? Yes, very much so. The very same things which we would count as the negatives actually turn out to be the positives because decision making is that much more faster. The family is in sync. At the same time, the lack of skills is what might prove to be a deterrent.
Yeah. I think you mentioned about that they are agile and they are nimble when it comes to taking decisions, but about what skills do they have? So Manish, we talked about again the professional and the talents and the talent that you have. What is your view? Do you think a company like yours or family managed businesses can drive change faster in a COVID environment and thereby have a competitive advantage over other companies? I mean, Asian Paints is known to be very nimble and adapt to change. In fact, I wanted to even ask you, what is it that you would advise corporates not to do in order to continue to do well in this environment?
So I guess first of all, I mean, obviously the pandemic is a disruption which is, I guess, has no parallel in some sense of the word. So there are normal economic disruptions, and maybe some of us, I'm not old. I've seen only one, which was the economic crisis that we had, the financial economic crisis we had in 2009. But there are many in the company who would have seen, a couple more. I've seen 91, but I was too young. I was still in college at that point of time. And so you were looking at it from the sidelines. But I think any crisis of sorts like this has got a way of, I would say two things. If you are on the negative side, it has the ability to rearrange the order, so to speak, in that sense, because there will be many business models that would have got disrupted or would have completely stopped. And if you are unable to come up with something new, then you could get completely disrupted. And on the positive side, if you are one of those companies that can take advantage of maybe somebody else's inability to perform, then, or you can probably aggregate, create a new market, then obviously there are lots of opportunities that one sees during this kind of pandemic. And I think I would agree with Doctor that I think you have to look at this as an opportunity rather than looking at it as a fight for survival. Obviously, you need to do, and I think a lot of us spend the first 2 months maybe putting in place new processes. Those of us who are more technology oriented and technology based, more digital. I think we were able to do it with lesser cost and faster in terms of pace. For some of us, there was a lot of investment and reinvention that took place in processes. But I think post the first 2 months, everybody found a new way or a new sort of market to be able to try to put growth back in some sense of the word, because I think staying still was just not possible. I guess in family businesses or family owned or led businesses, I would call it. I think the zeal to probably allow professional management to experiment was a lot more, because obviously I think the family was acutely aware that survival was at stake, and in many cases there was opportunity knocking on the door. So I think they gave a lot more freedom to whether it was family or professional managers to go experiment with new models and make sure that we remained in touch with all our stakeholders, all our customers, all our employees, and sort of kept that focus on sort of growing or making that business come back to datum line. I think that onus was like pushed really, really hard. And I think if you like was being mentioned, if you were more digital, it was faster to enable it. If you were less digital, or the business apparently it was not possible to be done digitally, then obviously you were very, very challenged in some sense of the word. But I guess people found means. Like we said, our painting business stopped, and we saw the government struggling for, let's say, getting sanitary, disinfectants done, and within our same sort of capabilities, we could produce those. And we also saw that as an opportunity to launch a service. So a branded product, a product that could be delivered through a service model, which was complementary to the painting service. And we today recognize that if you want to paint, then you will need a safe home, and a disinfection service goes hand in hand in that. And it also allowed us to remain relevant to a lot of people at that point of time. And I think those were things that we did well quickly and allowed us to get back on our feet and, empower, sort of, so to speak, emboldened employees to go back and say, hey, even in these times, we can go out and get business. So I think the management and I think being allowed to lead from the front became a big thing. And I think those businesses that did that have come back much stronger and better out of the pandemic. But I think it's still a long way to go to say that we are out of the pandemic. So I think many more things are going to be required, and we're going to have to sustain this energy a lot more. So I think the ownership will have to be at one point of time more patient, but at the same time more energetic and aggressive about trying to get future growth in, and invest in capability building that would make sure that your company survives probably another decade or so very differently than what we were. And obviously, in these points of time, you need to look at whether you can become the disruptor. So the most aggressive form is that companies think of themselves as disruptors, unleash new capabilities, new strategies, because customers will be a little more forgiving at this time when you are experimenting, because they're wanting something new. And it's possible to do that. And if it's possible to do that in disruptions, I think we're going to be that much better placed.
No, I think, like you said, ownership to be nimble and agile, to create an environment for the management to adapt to the change, so you can be a disruptor in this
Sure.
environment. And I think you articulated that really well. So Aditi, I also wanted to ask you, in this environment, what changes have you made or your business has made to continue to remain and create a competitive advantage in the post-COVID environment?
I think one is that we locked down our firm 10 days maybe before the required lockdown. So that was a huge positive. We did that pretty fast. I'm also not we're about 500 people max in our firm, but we're spread over almost 50 cities, small cities. And so we had done that. We'd also, there was a huge focus on digital way back. And today I was just thinking, my business has no business not to be digital. Think of it. I have nothing physical. I don't sell paint. The share certificates are not paper anymore. So I better be digital, and we had already started that long ago. And it's just that the people that we were trying to be digital to, like our distributors, adapted much faster now because they didn't have a choice. The good thing is that, all my salespeople had iPads, whether they were in Hubli, or they were in Udaipur, or they were in Delhi. So when they had an iPad, I didn't have to worry, do they have a computer at home? Can they be connected or nothing? So they already had that. Of course, it was at that point looked at as a big luxury spend of mine, but look, it's really proved well, because I remember in March we couldn't even get computers. Everything was out of stock. So we kind of were ahead of the curve in that. And we have a really good B2B platform for our distributors, and we have an amazing B2C platform that I've been developing for a while. And what this helped us do is focus more on it and get everyone's focus on it, to be able to just enhance it. So, we've started the process of enhancing it and making it a priority, which may not have been as large a priority in the minds of even board of directors or my father, who's the chairman, etc. Now suddenly it became important. Digital marketing, which was always treated like a very side, marketing, like always got sort of a secondary, got secondary attention to the usual billboard marketing. Now gained attention that I've always been shouting about from the beginning. So my life became easier. I mean, I don't know if that answered your question, but yes, we had already started the changing journey, and this has just been an injection in the right direction.
Yes. No, you were. It was as if like you were already preparing for it, but it just got enhanced because of the COVID environment, which is great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm going to come back to that succession planning question with Manish, and then I have a question for you, Aditi, as well. But Manish, you have these in your company. You have multi-generational challenges. So how pre-COVID, given COVID, irrespective of COVID, when the scale changes of the company, like yours has changed over the years and over the generations, how does the family actually do succession planning in such businesses?
So I think in generation one, I think the process was a lot more intuitive in that sense of the word. There was not that much of a science going at that point of time. Maybe the 70s, late 70s, early 80s is when the second generation came into the business. It was a lot about intuition, touch and feel, and also about making sure that they had an ability to contribute. Obviously, the firm was very, very small. And it was easy to integrate them into learning the ropes of the business by actually taking them out in the market. So I think the first lesson learned was, look, get the hands of the next generation dirty, so to speak, get them into ops, get them into whatever they are qualified to handle and do, and then figure out what they like to do and what they are good at doing, and then probably give them greater and greater responsibility, obviously, if they are up to it. And even in that time, I think without telling too many people, they brought in a few advisors to make sure that they had the right inputs and gave the right amount of impetus to the second generation that came in. I think when we joined the firm, I think the anchor had already dropped. You had to start at the bottom of the pyramid, so to speak, in that sense. You started as a management trainee after your education. And I guess the only maybe advantage you had was that you were given an opportunity to showcase your skills, whereas maybe somebody else who might have just been an MBA off the street might have been put through a bit of a bigger mill in some sense of the word. But otherwise, I think you did the same things, and we learned the business in that way. And I think something that Aditi said earlier, I kind of build on, is that once you've gone through, and I spent 1992 till 2018, so 26 years in operating the business before you even got onto the board. So in some sense of the word, you knew the business inside out. You had been or run many parts of the businesses and have risen up the ranks. So you had a touch and feel of the business. You had a real insight into how the business ran and what it was capable of doing and what it can actually achieve in some sense of the word before you got to sort of work yourself up to the board and be able to contribute at the apex decision level of the company in some sense of the word. So I think my biggest learning is make sure that people are sort of starting in the business, they understand the business well before you kind of wear the hat of investor ownership or for that matter, steward of the business, as was being discussed when we opened the conversation. I think if you don't understand the business, it's very difficult to wear those hats very, very well. And I think that's an important lesson that I think all businesses need to put them, regardless of their size. Make people learn the ropes, run operating parts of the business before they can jump out and do the ownership kind of things that you want to do, or the stewardship if your business is large enough things to do in some sense of word. It also makes sure that people then respect you, whether it is the non-family managers or whether it's if you're a publicly listed enterprise, then your independent directors. If you have risen from the ranks and understand the business, then there is at least a bit of a mutual respect that you can sort of get in terms of some of the suggestions you make and how you handle that. So I think this is, lesson number one. Lesson number two, there are obviously many challenges of transition. And I think managing transitions is probably critical. It's very difficult, to do textbook sort of planning. But I think doing some sort of planning on managing transitions, having multiple generations work simultaneously on the board or in management, I think is the second stone that you would want to put there. And third is actually manage that physical change that happens pretty well. And I think if you're a firm like us, which has to manage not only change in the ownership generations, but also manage simultaneously change in our professional managers in the company, I think then you got to really think about the timing and the interplay of how professional managers know the ownership and what they would want very well. So you need to really work on the management and family interaction and develop some sense of governance, whether you call it a family council, whether you call it board of directors, depending on the structure of your company. You need to find some kind of org structure initiative where you will have the conversations about one, what the ownership wants, two, what the business can, wants from ownership and what the business wants from the world. And then obviously, if you're a listed enterprise, then obviously the requirements of governance get, put a new layer on top of this. And that obviously is increases the level of complexity very, very significantly, because then there are things you can talk about and the things you can't talk about because of governance requirements out there. And so it requires even more premeditated thought and effort to keep people engaged. And last but not the least, as the family grows or as the number of owners grow, you need to find new ways to keep ownership engaged with the business, knowledgeable about the business. And that I think is probably going to be the greatest challenge that faces multi-generation businesses in some sense of the word. And then obviously, how do you prepare new owners who may not have been part of management team to become responsible owners or responsible stewards in that sense of the word? I think that's going to be sort of the next biggest challenge that a lot of larger businesses will have to face.
Yes, but you're a great example of, and I mentioned this before, about how ownership and the professional management have learned to coexist and challenge each other and grow the business together. Aditi, Manish talked about moving up the ranks and doing, operational training, which you're doing, and earning the respect of the rest of the. He also talked about, transition. So I wanted to ask you, when you came in, did you face personally any challenges in terms of that transition thing? Would you do things a little differently going forward than maybe your father, how he grew the business? because you're going to be in the next generation?
Well, when I came into the business, so I graduated in 98, just so that everyone knows, in the States, and I'd done a finance back, undergrad. And then 2 years I worked at Merrill Lynch in New York in investment banking, and that was like the toughest 2 years of work. You're burnt out at the end. So anything is easy after you finish that. Also, it gives you a very, very good, strong work ethic foundation. And then I came here in 2000. And yes, when I first came, of course, I came just as a regular employee. But it was, it was challenging because no other family member had ever come into the business. My father had built this investment banking business, and then I had come in. And that time it was the investment banking business. And, I had to... I think I had to probably face, I don't even realize it now, but now I probably realize that, the energy around was like the eyes were on me. There was no precedent to this. They were all professionals in the organization. I'm sure there was some, gossip and chatter about nepotism and, where I'm going to go and whether I'm qualified, etc. And then I moved on to the asset management business back in 2002. And I think at one point someone actually questioned or said something, and maybe it was in, fury or whatever, that you haven't even done your MBA. Like, even though I was a Wharton undergrad, and I had a remark like that actually made, like, what makes you think that you should go ahead? You haven't even done an MBA. I don't feel that you need titles to, you should demonstrate it through your work. But even so, I took that up as a challenge. And I said, you know what, that person, I don't ever want anyone to ever have to question me about qualifications. And so instead of taking it as like a negative, you take it as a positive. And so I said, so 7 years after my undergrad, I applied for MBA. Or 6 years, I applied for MBA. And the 7th year I went because I said, I don't care. And I will not only do an MBA, I will go to the, a top school. Which is what I ended up doing, to feel secure and to make, I guess, everyone else feel that, I've worked to get the qualification, as I should. And so those were like your initial challenges. Of course, then, you come back and, which position do you get? You do a little bit here, you do a little bit there. You can't just like oust someone of their position and decide to become the head of this. So those sort of things. When I remember in 2010, the marketing head left, or 2011, and my father was thinking of maybe keeping him back or recruiting someone. And I ran to him. I said, please, 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 no. Like, now I've really worked hard. I've worked through the ranks. Like, give me this opportunity. So these were sort of, I would say, little anecdotes. So things were not given to me. I had to ask for them. I had to prove myself. That was all part of the course. And what I would do differently, well, from my father and the way things are managed, of course, I'm more digital in my thinking. I feel I'm in a way, you can say, modernized in that way. I'm definitely, the professional management is now more my age than his age.
Yes.
So you can relate more to them. My CEO is only like 3 years older than me, and that never happened when you were much younger. So, there's a different sense of camaraderie and partnership than it's ever happened. So, I just think times are different. I just, my father was working in a different time. It was a different era. I think the way I think about everything is more process, more scientific.
Yes.
And try to drive people to think like that with checklists. Just in a more organized manner constantly. And I tell everyone, automate. Why is there paper? Automate. So it's very different. And I would say the generation above maybe is more comfortable with paper and the old way of doing things in a way. So my mind is wired and thinks differently. So those are two different things. But as I've said before, in our organization, we have no business not to be digital, because what we do is, like, there are papers and forms. I say, but there is nothing physical about my business, but we are We are creating physicality in my business by making people sign forms and fill in forms and all that. Like, where everything can be done, with an easier process online. So, those are things that I'm thinking of.
No, it's great you took up the challenge, moved up the ranks, earned your stripes, and got the respect. But talking about digital, Dr. Tulsi, I have a question. There are a lot of these new age companies, new entrepreneurs. So we have the Olas and the Paytms, and they're going to be, like the giants of tomorrow. So, what, in your view, in this environment, is the future of family managed business? Do you see, their children taking over businesses? What is your view?
So I want to just give you a light anecdote on this question of yours. There was an article which I sent to one of the good journals, and it was on family businesses and what should be the strategy for the kind of cocktail of shocks that these family businesses are going through.
Yes.
I was so shocked when I received a mail from the editor who said that, we have a turnaround time of about a year or so, and I don't see family businesses surviving beyond a year in Europe, America, and most of the countries in the world. I mean, this was her response. And I was so shocked. Incidentally, it got published elsewhere. That's a different story. But the point is this: have we really reached a point where we need to say RIP family businesses? Right? In my mind, that's not true. Family businesses have survived over generations. If you see the way in which there are family businesses which are more than 100 years old. Japan has some of the oldest family businesses. What I would like to bring to the table here is the following. When you're looking at family businesses, what is it that is going to take for these family businesses to survive? And what are the lessons that one can learn from, say, the Asian paints of the world, right? That's really something which you need to mull over. And there again, it's almost, the analogy is to a healthy human being, right? If one were to be detected with cancer or COVID on a particular day, you can't say, I'm going to start living better and I'm going to improve my lifestyle from today, right? Now, any business which has been healthy from both the family subsystem, from the ownership subsystem and the business subsystem, would be in a better position to take all these shocks. And I think research has shown that if you have a better emotional and a physical kind of a state, you would be able to take any of these ailments far better. So that's one part of it. What is it that family businesses have that some of these other businesses don't have? We talk of physical capital. We talk of financial capital. What family businesses have in large doses is basically social capital, right? So there is something called a family social capital, which has to be taken care of. And during this crisis, it's very easy to kind of lose sight of that social capital. How would you lose social capital? And I'm not talking about the well-known family businesses which have kind of traversed that journey, because most of our businesses are still small and medium family business enterprises, right? And there is this always the jugaad tendency that let me try and cut corners. Let me try and throw out employees. But those employees constitute your social capital. Let me do some price gauging, right? So that those customers are not going to come back to you when they see you doing things in a particular way. Now, this may not work so much for a professional company. Even there would be cost cutting, but it would be far more, systematic, and it would be kind of explained. But when you're looking at family businesses, how will they survive the test of time? I think as I see more and more of it, even Manishji was speaking about getting processes in place. There are huge lacunae in the manner in which family businesses are working on the business side alone. Somebody was telling me that he realized that for the last 12 years, he was paying charge to the bank for the overdraft facility without even having used it. So this was a time when he decided, when he saw that there were these overdraft limits which were costing the business a whole lot. So trying and ascertaining where you could cut costs in a manner through improving processes, through inducting systems, that is what family businesses have been doing. And I'm sure that many of these family businesses are going to succeed. But as I have been maintaining throughout, it has to be that the family has to support the business and the business has to support the family. At this time, it is very easy for family to start falling apart. One of the worst things that could be done is somebody who is at the helm, he or she says, decisions that I take, how is the family going to look upon this? What are the governance mechanisms? Manishji spoke about family governance. That is very, very critical, right? I think this is also a time where some amount of frugality would have to be brought in, which possibly the newer generations are not used to. The newer generations which have not built the business also need a booster dose of humility, right? And I was just talking to some of my students this morning and they were saying, ma'am, you know, I've never seen something like this. I said, this is a very small age that you've spent on planet Earth for you to see something like this. You know, think of your fathers and grandfathers who would have gone through multiple wars, and think of this as a war situation. So I, in fact, would be very hopeful, because this adversity, I think, teaches a whole lot, especially in family business. And this is a time where I have heard, you know, science saying, my students saying, I'm learning from my father. You know, he is so calm, and the manner in which he's responding to people is no different from what he would respond to earlier. And there's just one more point I want to make. And why is it that family businesses are in a better position to weather this? Most of the large corporates, the multinationals, in fact, if you have the managers, they live a QSQT kind of a life. And what is QSQT is quarter se quarter tak, right? Whereas family businesses are more long-term in their views. So they are not looking at what is going to happen in the next few months or in the next quarter. Heads won't roll, right? And those are some of the things which are going to help family businesses succeed. I'm very, very certain. I'm sure that that lady who said no to the paper because she thought family businesses are going to die, she will probably accept a paper next year. And so in that hope, I survive.
No, a lot of learnings for me also to hear about the family business. But Manish, there's one question I wanted to ask you. I think one point we haven't touched upon is on, you know, the context of global business and globalization, which was a word which has been talked about so much. What, in your views, do you think a family managed business can globalize better than a non-family managed business?
I would not get into that larger debate whether one business is better suited to another, but I would answer it more generically, saying that if there is a challenge that requires long-term investment and long-term thinking, going global is certainly right up there, because you cannot go there and say that there is a quick win that you're going to see there. Whether you are a technology business, and even if you want to sell software through the cloud, which is sold online by paying credit cards, etc., even that takes some time to build your scale, your brand, and your presence in international markets. So it requires some long-term commitment in that sense. So it's like any other, I would say, long-term commitment. If you have an ownership of the business that's going to support that investment, and typically family ownership looks at sort of the longer-term future as was being espoused, then chances are that those businesses are going to allow their business to go there. I would only think that at some point of time, some of these could be vanity investments, and that could be one of the failings that a family business can have, that I'm just doing it because maybe 4 of my peers who are also businessmen have gone global. I think that is a place where family professional management, very open conversation about your capability brings together a more realistic plan on what we can achieve when we go global in some sense of the word, and also maybe a more realistic assessment of what are the kind of markets you can go to and where you would succeed and what you need to do there. So the mechanics of yes, we can become larger and go global is something that an entrepreneur or a family business would do. But I think there is equally a role for managers to play in terms of where would you go, what is the kind of challenge you would take, and how we would achieve those. I think those get answered. So it's a symbiotic thing. And so the ownership, like it does in any other situation, provides the long-term view, and the management in some sense provides the mechanics of how you get done. Combination of this can go global, can achieve new businesses in India as you go forward, or maybe disrupt some other businesses as you move forward in that sense.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Aditi, I wanted to ask you about, you were talking about how you moved up the ranks and, you went and did your MBA, etc. So there are all, and how, you've professionalized, how professionalized the company is. So when we were talking the other day, we were talking about how you attract talent, and you had very. I really liked your views about how you would like to dispel this whole myth, about a family managed company versus a non-family managed company. I really wanted you to talk a little bit about that today in this forum.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like the old school thought of what a family run company is, especially if you're of a good size, needs to just be dispelled in everyone's mind. Because today, family run businesses are professional and family together. Um, and I feel you have to take the best of both. So in family run businesses, people are thinking long term. You're not just thinking of to please someone, for the next quarter, because you're not going to be there for the next, in the next 5 years, you're planning your exit of some sort. You just want your options to go up and then you want to get out. So in family businesses, you're thinking long term. You are willing to take a pain for 3, 4, 5 years because you've invested for the next 15. And again, that goes back to my digital argument that we don't know in 15 years the kind of you're already seeing a trickle of it, but in 15 years it'll be very different. So why not invest in it today? I don't mind, so that we sort of nurture it for the next 15 years. Also, I feel in family businesses, they've been old. The reason family businesses have come down the generation to where we are is because they had strong values and ethics. Shortcuts, if you have shortcuts in your business, you're never going to last. You're never not going to last for 3 generations. So it's very important for that family generation to continue that and keep an eye on that and keep that framework intact, where customers are concerned, where investors for me are concerned, where employees are concerned, and just generally high ethics and family values. So, I mean, family values given to the business. And the other thing I think about a family business is just that it feels more personal, is what my guys tell me. It's more personal when it's like you have someone looking after you.
Yes.
In a large professional company, you get lost. Yet, I don't feel a family company should, it's the right person that needs to be at the helm of a family company, whether it's a professional person or a family member. Just because it's a family member doesn't mean that they should be the ones always at the helm of the business. If there is someone that is better than them and that they agree to it, and I said, if you can look at it as objectively as that. So if you can get the best of both, I think the future of family businesses is very strong. Now you can look at the West. I've been to a lot of family conferences in Europe and not so much in the US, but a lot in Europe. They told me we're like 9th generation.
Yes.
German businesses with 300 family members or 250 family members. They said we've never even seen half of them, and they come, we'll give them a ticket once in 5 years and we get together and I meet like long lost cousins or something. And they have nothing to do with the business. They have shares and they probably live on some dividends that they get. Some of the very qualified members may be part of what is called a supervisory board, which is in addition to the board of directors. And you have professional management. So is that a family business or is that professional? Oh, these are companies that are doing very well. Chocolate companies and, hotel companies or conglomerates, a lot of FMCG companies in Germany. I mean, they're all really family run. We don't even realize that. And they just take best of both. So I think that's where the Indian family businesses will evolve to, and there won't be something called family business. Meaning that word will be blurred. Is Walt Disney a family business? Is Facebook a family business? Is Microsoft a family business? They all started with a family and with a founder. So I think all those things eventually will get blurred as we go into the future. And you'll have more professionals with families playing a complementary part and keeping the framework and values strong. And that should be the responsibility of the family. So I feel I think it's a myth to say family businesses are unprofessional. No, everything's coming together as it should, and they have the best of both.
Yes, no, and I think both you and Manish, it's so clear that there can be an absolutely coexistence of professional management and family, and how the business can be so successfully, and how the businesses can grow so successfully. Dr. Tulsi, before I give it over to Malu for questions, I had a question for you on your program at your college. I am very curious to know what the gender ratio is in your course. Do you see there is an issue with women and this legacy of family managed businesses in India?
So, Radha, can you just repeat that last part of the question? I missed that part. You said the gender and the second part of the question. I'm sorry.
With women and legacy in family managed business.
All right. Okay, Radha. Yeah. So, as far as the women in the program is concerned, for a long time, we've had just an 8 to 15%. That's the kind of ratio that we have. In good years, it's 15%. If it's not such a great time, then it's about 8%. So as far as women in family businesses are concerned, I just want to touch on just one more point, which is we're discussing legacy today. We're talking about family business legacy. The question I would want to pose here for everyone is, should the objective be to keep the legacy of the family business intact, or should it be to keep the family in business intact?
Absolutely.
Right? And the two are very, very different. They're very, very different. Right? So if your objective is that I need to keep my family business together, that could be a different one. Now, coming to the role of women and legacy, it was very interesting to hear Aditi's experience herself. And I would just like to leave everybody with this thought, that if Aditi were not a woman, would she have even been asked this question? Did you do an MBA? Right? Was it so much a gender issue? I'm not so certain about it. Yes, women in business have to work harder to prove themselves. Having said that, we have some really good examples of women who have been able to do wonderfully well in business in India and abroad. Here we have Amira Shah, we have Sangeeta Reddy from FICCI itself. We have a whole set of women who are very, very competent and capable. I think it requires education from the point of view of not just the family, but also the woman. So she has to ask herself, what is it that I want? What will make me happy? And the family has to ask itself a question, is it a matter of gender, or is it who's the best person to do this job? Right? So if those questions are answered, I think it should not be about, I mean, we don't think twice. The entire financial sector has women heading it, right? Yes. In multiple other businesses, Radha is here, Aditi is here. I mean, all of you are here. Malu, you are here also, heading a very powerful body. So the point is that it should ultimately depend on the competence of the individual. Family businesses which are more conservative may not be so easily acceptable. I could write, like Bollywood, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. I could make 4 films out of it. So I won't bore you with that. But yes, the conservativeness of family businesses still stays. We're not talking about those businesses where, people have gone abroad, got educated, who are more accepting of gender equality and diversity and so on. We are talking about those businesses which still dominate the scene as far as Indian businesses are concerned. So there is a lot that needs to be achieved, and that's where programs like ours, I think, try to address that gap by getting the family members and educating them in multiple ways.
Yes. Thank you. Malu, I think I'm going to hand it over to you. I could see there were some comments coming up on the screen, so I'm sure there are some people who want to say something. So I'm going to
Yes.
hand it to you.
Thank you so much. This is a new area for me, but there are so many takeaways. A lot of points when Dr. Jayakumar said non-family companies have started working like family companies. It never struck me. It's an eye-opener to see that, you know, ownership means so much. Aditi said, give up ego. Very difficult to do that, but when we see younger generation do that, it's fabulous. And Manish did mention about being relevant, remain relevant, and go digital. And capacity building is as critical as social capital. So before we go into the questions, it is our pleasure to have Mr. Hemendra Kothari in our midst. He's the chairman of the DSP Investment Managers Private Limited. I'm a great admirer of yours, Mr. Kothari, for the fabulous work that you also do in the wildlife conservation space as well. Mr. Kothari, you represent the fourth generation of a family of prominent stockbrokers. So it would be very interesting to hear your views on preserving the legacy of a family business.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. First of all, it was enlightening what everybody talked, and particularly my daughter. Our family is now, this is more than 154 years we are in the business. Maybe just before the stock exchange started, somewhere in 1896, the family started, which I have the record. So Aditi is the fifth generation in the business. What has evolved, as normally it happens that second, third, fourth generations, things did not work out what the original founder found. I was fortunate. I was the fourth generation. I was the right time, right place. But what we have to say that it is the professionals who have made success of the family business of mine. To get a quality people to work with you, to see that they are successful only if we are giving enough powers to them. What I say, the family has to bring the value systems, ethos. There are certain aspects which people have to follow, which whether you are working the way Aditi works, it doesn't matter. Whether she is only on the board and she's a part and looking after as heading the family after me, and seeing that the right person is managing the company. That is, and is enough freedom is given to that person. That is very more important. So family owned and professionally managed. That is what, and a lot of companies have started doing, a lot of families have started doing it. And I do expect that from Aditi. And she said that also, that she would like that way to be done. So I'll be happy if we give a guidance. We have experience working, in fact, the family members in that business. So when they are on the board, they can know that whether the professional manager is doing his duty properly or not, or we require some changes or not. I think basic guidance or the views can be given, but you have to give enough freedom for the professional management to work. I think that is all I have to say. And I'm very happy that so many ladies are also taking so active part. And I have two daughters, so I have no choice but and to support the cause of the women. And of course, I always have been doing it, but I believe that they have to also have kept, see that the men working for them are also given freedom and not to make them feel that just because I have the shareholding, we are the one who will call the last shot. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kothari. That was a big bonus for us. Really appreciate that. And I'm sure if you had 4 sons, you would still let the 2 daughters lead the business. I'm sure about that.
You know, daughters are more powerful.
Absolutely. We have a lot of questions. I don't know if you have the time to do it. Dr. Tulsi, Manish, and Aditi, would you like to take 1 or 2 questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. No problem.
Thanks. So there's one question here. It's about one of the biggest challenges for the next generation is how to keep the flock together. So what are your thoughts on that, both Dr. Jayaram and Aditi?
Aditi, you want to go first?
No, I think, Doctor, why don't you go first, Professor?
Okay. So how do you keep the flock together?
Yeah.
Manishi spoke about the concept of a family council. These are not textbook things. You know, when you're looking at, you may have just 1 or 2 sons, and then you say that, you know, we are a small, well-knit family. You're not looking at those sons having children and those children having children, you know, so there is a certain myopic way in which you're looking at a cohesive family. So the first thing is, I think, right from day one, what we would tell our students and what we would prescribe is that when there is a second generation, start putting down some of the things which are the rules which constitute a family governance, right? The other thing is communication, more than anything else. You know, at the end of the day, the breakdown of a family business happens when there is no communication. I'll tell you something which, again, a lot of these are anecdotal, but, you know, they make for very, very good, strong points. There was a set of brothers who were there, who were having some, conflicts. A set of brothers who were having conflicts. And the boy was with us. He said, ma'am, we want you to speak to both my father and my uncle so that, they both come together. The father of this boy, he tells me that, ma'am, there used to be a time when we wouldn't even speak. You know, aankhon mein ishara hota tha, and the other person used to understand what was going on. And today we can travel 2 hours in the same car and we don't kind of exchange glances. Okay, so the conflict which arises is largely because of, again, the nature of the family business, where there are emotions which come into play, right? In a business, you have a boss, the boss tells you something, or you have a peer, or you have a subordinate, you say something, it's taken professionally. What happens in a family business is what happens in the office does not stay in the office. It gets carried over home, right? And again, I would like to say something which we tell our students as well. You know, and I'm going to put it in Hindi because a lot of it makes a lot of sense when you're speaking Hindi also. There is one saying which says that man ka mat bhed ho sakta hai, man ka bhed nahi ho sakta, right? You can have a difference in opinion. You cannot have a conflict in terms of, you know, both of you feeling apart. So I think if there are some basic fundamental principles which are harped on, I think this whole thing of managing a family business becomes easier. The bigger the family is, there are going to be challenges because there are emotions which come into play. If somebody slighted you in the office, you come back at the dining table, the father and the son may not want to look at each other, may not want to speak to each other. Communication becomes extremely important. So a set of non-formal or this whole informality in relations, roles, responsibilities, that needs to be ended. There have to be governance measures which need to be put in place. How will you treat a daughter-in-law when she comes in and wants to do something completely different, right? What is the communication? What is the thought process? Everything needs to be planned out very, very differently, right? So that's what I would want to leave you with.
Thank you. Aditi, you want to add something to that?
You know, frankly, I'm the only family member in the business. So, you know, my sister is not in the business at all. So I think I want to pass the question on to Manish ji.
No, I have another question for you. Yeah.
Okay,
thanks.
okay.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks, Aditi. Manish, there's one question and we'll wrap up after that. It says, what's the expectation of the current generation from the next generation? Does this match the ambitions and the desire of the next generation? There could be different career paths which they want to adopt. And are these aligned to the family business? So what would you expect from the next generation?
Okay, interesting answer. Interesting question. I think I'll go back a little bit and answer that question with some little bit of personal experience, if that works. So I think, you know, when I sort of finished, I'd done an engineering degree, I finished my MBA and came back to, I mean, first of all, people ask the questions, and I have even friends today in the US who ask the question, Manish, why would you want to go back to India? Don't you want to work? Don't you want to work in the US in some sense of the word? And maybe it was unconscious, maybe it was inborn. I don't know what it was, but I sort of came and maybe joined Asian Paints in some sense. I had some experience. I'd worked there while getting my MBA done. So there was 2 years I'd spent working for somebody. So you at least had a little bit. But maybe if I were to do it again, I would say I would have wanted to work 2 more years there to get maybe slightly more grounding and maybe a very different perspective, and then come back and join. And which is what I think I would encourage my children to do in some sense of word if they wanted to join the family business of sorts. So that's probably one difference. That is, try and seek some amount of experience somewhere else so that you can bring a very different perspective than the one you enjoy. And it also maybe to some degree, if you're a young person, opens up the horizons on what are possibilities very, very differently in some sense of the word. As far as you know, the next generation is concerned, and what we are going to do and what we are going to accept, I think the first question was that I never questioned that I would join the family business. I think we'll have to go back to that question and say there will be many in our next generation who will probably never choose to even work even as a management trainee in the business in some sense of word. And so we will have to sort of as successors, allow that freedom at one point of time in terms of what career and professional choices they make. But at the same time, I have to work very, very hard to instill in them their roles as investors and owners of this very large and very successful family business and continue to get them and make sure that they're engaged on this business.
Can you mute yourself?
And that I think is probably the twin challenge that we are going to face in the next generation, as the number of career opportunities sort of blossom for people. You know, there were at one point of time when you joined education field, you said, I'll become a CA, I'll become an engineer, I'll become this. Today, I mean, those age-old concepts are completely destroyed. You can have very, very different educational backgrounds. You can have very different work, professional challenges that people can aspire to go up, so to speak. And at the same time, you have this very successful business, and you have very disparate ownership, and you need to make sure that they understand the responsibility that they have got, the opportunity that this business gives to them in terms of reputation, in terms of the social capital that they have got. And obviously the point that Aditi made out, trying to make sure that they're grounded and sort of don't lose their feet, from ground. But at the same time, I'm very proud of what that business has been able to achieve, because without working there, how do you manage that? I had my elder daughter is a lawyer. She doesn't work as a lawyer, but she was studying law, and she worked for 2.5 months at Asian Paints in the legal department. And she said, Dad, at the end of it, I know now what you talk about and what it means to work for that company. Even though she stayed with me her entire life, and I've spent all of my life talking about Asian Paints, but I think sort of being there, achieving that is, I think, out there. And I think that's somehow what we have to integrate. Whether they will choose Asian Paints as a professional career choice, that is probably not as relevant as them figuring out what this business means to them in their life, what is their role, and how they are going to adapt to that role. Some of them may not even join the board of Asian Paints ever, because we'll have limited number of seats on the board, and we will have to have independent members and managers who will join that board. But how do you still be proud of the ownership? What are the kind of processes they will participate in out there? And we're sort of working, and at one level, you will have to work not only on the formal processes that Doctor was talking about, which is the family council or the family board, whatever works for each of the families. But you'll also have to work on the softer side of processes. Are the kids connected? We don't live in the same home. We live probably in 15 different homes, the ownership. do you meet enough? Like she was saying, do I meet people? Do I understand what makes the other person sort of work? What are their drivers in life? Because it's only when you understand each other is when you're going to be able to keep, so to speak, the flock together. That look, we are here because of a common purpose. But when we are somewhere else, we could pursue other things in that sense. And this management of balance at one end and diversity at another end, you're going to have to continuously juggle. And how are you going to prepare your children to sort of do this? If you have girls, then you're going to get married in another family. That is going to bring itself a whole new set of perspectives and challenges. How do you make sure that they are up to the challenge of this? I think we've taken sort of the first step that at least in this generation, many of us worked in management. We now have only one family member, that too at mid-management levels, that working in management. And that's one answer that we have put forward to how we can sustain this business beyond the infamous third generation.
I want to make a point, Malu, just a
Yes.
Final comment. All of this, we talk about the new generation having the knowledge, and as Manishji said, very little effort which is made on the soft skills. And I do want to emphasize one bit very, very clearly, which is how grounded is the next generation. The humility of that next generation to take on that large role and to carry people along. Especially people who have been with the family for, say, the last 20, 30 years. I'm just going to leave you with one anecdote. I had a student sitting with me in front of me, and the father and the child, normally we do an interview where we meet the mentor and the student as well, the candidate as well. And the father spoke very well. And I had to ask him, I said, sir, what's your background? What have you studied? He kind of looked at me apologetically and said, ma'am, you know what? I haven't even cleared my 10th. All right. The family is a 1,000 crore plus business. I don't want to get into the names and so on. The boy then looked at me and said, ma'am, he's a very hardworking man. He has worked very hard. That's why he's sitting here. I said, he has worked very hard. That's why you are sitting here. So that humility, and that's something which I think as an education, I want all of everybody to know that, Aditi, you spoke about an MBA. An MBA does not train you in some of the attitudes which are required for running a family business. It gives you the knowledge, but it doesn't typically teach you what is required for a family business in that sense. And I'm saying that because I am teaching the MBA here and I'm teaching the family business here as well. So there's a vast difference in training managers and training owners. A lot of it has to do with the soft skills. So I'm just leaving you with that. We keep on talking about the business. We tend to not focus on the softer side and the softer skills. It's about keeping the people together. It's about keeping the family, but it's also keeping the people together. And that's what family businesses have done.
Thank you, Tulsi. Thank you very much. I think,
and of course, the surprise bonus of hearing from Mr. Hemendra Kothari. You are quite a legend in the industry. So I think these are very interesting. The conversation went very deep. I thought it was very well done. So thank you so much. I also want to thank Malu. So Malu and I curated this association or this initiative where, SP JMR, which is our institute, and FICCI Flow would do these joint webinars. This is actually the third topic, and there are 2 more coming up soon. And I just want to say that, of course, FICCI Flow, the makeup of the a membership is such. There are a lot of women entrepreneurs and people from family business, non-family. They're very interesting profile. I just thought I'll take a minute to say also about SPJN. We are a premier management institute, come in top 5, top 6 in India. Of course, number 1 in Mumbai right now. I say it with all humility. Tulsi, I'm sorry to say that. But I do want to say that, our mission is influencing practice. And I think conversations like this create thoughts and patterns and questions which ultimately get percolated into the industry and all. And that's what is right on, segues straight into our mission statement. And with that, I also want to kind of, I thought it was a good opportunity to share that we have a Center of Family Managed Businesses, which Dr. Tulsi Jayaram heads. There are a lot of research which goes there, case studies, certification courses, and long term. Of course, I'm not doing a pitch. I just thought it'd be interesting to know if anybody's interested. That's a good place to be in. A lot of the peer learning is fabulous. I used to teach some time back, and the kind of industries we get to know, the kind of people we get to meet, I think it's a very rich conversation in the classroom. I just thought I'd leave that thought there because maybe there's some interest there. So again, thank you again, Malu. It was a very good initiative when you initiated this collaboration with our institute. I thank you. It's a wonderful pleasure to know you better. And thanks again for the audience, the FICCI Flow Mumbai chapter members. I know some people from outside Mumbai, and I know many of my colleagues are here. So thank you all for joining in, and watch this space for the next 2 webinars. Thanks again, guys. Good night.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.